not known الذين, those of you, جاهدوا, who strived in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, minkum, from you, ويعلم الصابرين, and he has not known the ones who have sabr. Okay, so now I'm going to point out what I wanted to point out. Look here, يعلم الله الذين جاهدوا, يعلم الصابرين, and وليعلم الله الذين آمنوا, that Allah may know. So this is interesting if you don't get it completely, right? We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Sami' and He is Alim. We have talked about the attribute of knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it is perfect. Allah knows everything that has happened, that will happen, how will it be if it were to happen. So He knows everything and He has written down everything. So what does this mean? وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, right? And I was also, challenged on this verse or similar verse by Jehovah's Witness as well. So what does it mean when it says وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, or وَلِيَعْلَمَ الصَّابِرِينَ وَلِيَعْلَمَ الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا مِنْكُمْ, right? Does Allah not know it? And then when we do it, then Allah knows it? So if you go on your notes side, okay, this is a related verse on verse number 140. I forgot to mention that earlier, right? It's again talking about the same thing, right? وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا, right? Do not weaken and do not grieve in your heart. And this is talking about similar thing, that if you have received a wound, if you have received pain, they have received pain too. But the difference is that وَتَرْجُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَرْجُونَ, you expect from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which they do not expect, right? So they are just doing it for the worldly reason, and you're looking for akhirah. You're looking for the victory of Islam in the dunya as well akhirah. And this is something that is very important as well in other matters as well. When you're doing da'wah, one of the things that I say in my trainings is that I myself, like when I look at businessmen and salesmen and I see how much they have developed their pitches to sell their ideas, sell their services, sell their products, and how much less do we work on our deen and our obligation of da'wah and calling people and giving nasiha to Muslims and calling non-Muslims to Islam, it's like really sad. I mean, they are just doing it for a paycheck, for a commission, and we have like huge amounts of rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how much effort are we putting, and how much laziness are we showing? وَتَرْجُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَرْجُونَ, and you expect from Allah that they do not expect. Anyways, the point about the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what will I do tomorrow, what will I do in the next hour, how will I respond to my test. But the knowledge that is mentioned in this verse and the verses like that is the knowledge of something having occurred. Okay, very important. So because of the perfection of Allah, because of the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah already knows what I will do. Okay, this is because of the perfection. Because if Allah does not know, then Allah's knowledge is deficient. That's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that we worship. He knows it. But now, if He were to punish me or reward me based on His knowledge only, then I or someone else may, have a point that how can you give this thing, how can He give this reward? Or I can say, how can you punish me and I haven't done it? Maybe if you would have given me a chance, I would not have done it. As we know that on the day of judgment, the disbelievers and the zalimeen will deny, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have their hands and their skins testifying against them. Their body parts will be testifying against them. The angels will be testifying against them. So even after committed something, people deny. So how would it be that, if Allah were to just punish or reward them without even doing it? So this knowledge is a knowledge of something has happened. And this is the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punishes and rewards on. So this is from the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, to give an analogy, Remember, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the highest of example. There's none like him. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. But for us to understand it, imagine a teacher, right, who has a huge amount of experience, right, especially in the elementary school when you have the same classes you have been teaching, you know how people are progressing, and you have been, dealing with the same kid for 5 years, 10 years, 8 years, and then in grade 9, he comes in, and the score, right, this guy's probably going to get an 80 to 90% mark, or he's just going to flunk it, he's just going to fail the test. And you say, based on my knowledge, let's not even bother with it. I'm not going to write a test. I'm not going to prepare a test. You've passed. I'm going to give you an A and B and C, whatever. Or I'm just going to, fail you. You need to repeat the course, for example. Right? Now, obviously, right, even though the teacher might be right, but that is not something that would be accepted. And the teacher would give them the exam. They would write the exam. And most likely, the student will get a grade that the teacher expected, just because teacher had an experience with the student. Right? Now this is a human being. Based on his or her experience, he can make that judgment and it would be mostly right. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-a'la. Wallahu a'la wa a'lam. He knows best, and he's the most above us. Right? He's the most perfect. So he has perfect knowledge. So he knows it. But this is now that it has happened. Right? So before, in the case of teacher, before it was, teacher knew that the student is going to fail or have an A grade. But when the student actually gets it, now the teacher's knowledge is saying that, it has actually happened. So I hope that you understand this difference. Right? And this is something that you can explain when you're challenged with this question. But at the same time, it's important for you to know this thing. For you to realize this thing, I think for me, it opens my heart, it increases my belief. At the same time, with you having this deeper understanding, if somebody asks you about that, bi'ithnillahi ta'ala, you're able to respond. And you are able to see the justice and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this as well. Anyways, the point being that when these things happen, this nudawil of, coming of the victory to the Muslims and going it back to non-Muslims, or, vice versa, this is for these reasons. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may know the real believers, the ones who are not just with Islam when Islam is winning and succeeding, but they are there for the right reason because of their belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They do this driving in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are patient ones. Okay, let me have a sip of water. Let me know if you have any questions. Right. وَلَقَدْ, and indeed, kuntum, you were, تَمَنَّوْنَ, you were wishing, right? تَمَنَّى is to wish, al-mawta, the death, min qabli, before, and that talqahu, before you met it. You met him, you met it, meaning you met